All right. So let's discuss the correction of the errors. Remember last time I did say to you that there are different errors that usually occur. And as these errors occur, some of them affect, the agreement of the trial balance and others don't. In today's conversation, we want to concentrate on how you can correct those errors which affect the agreement of the trial balance. And the first one that we talked about was the error of omission. Yeah, the error of omission. Okay. Let's pick an example. So what we want to discuss that you see, mainly for these errors that affect the agreement, that do not affect the agreement of the trial balance, you need the journal entries for you to correct these errors. So I want to show you how to do the journal entries for the correction of the very errors and how to give some narrations. Here is an example on the error of omission. And the question is reading, a sale of goods worth 59 pounds to E. George had been completely omitted from the books. Okay. Had been completely omitted from the books. How do you correct such an error? Okay. This is an error of omission. You see, you sold some goods to George, which means George's account did receive, okay? George's account received. And then the sales account was credited because you sold, things moved out of the business. So since you were selling to George, you debit George's account with the same money. So A George is debited with the amount, 59 pounds, and then you credit the sales account, okay? So the sales account is credited with the same amount. So this is how you would do the journal entry to correct this error. Get the point that you always start with the debited account, the account that you are debiting. That's the first one you put on top, okay? You start with the account that you're debiting, and then the second one is the account that is getting credited. As very easy as it is. To give a narration, you would say the error of omission is now corrected. Very simple, okay? The error of what? Of omission. The error of omission is now corrected. So in other words, we have corrected the error of omission. Simple. Is there any question on how to correct the error of omission? Very easy. Read the question, pay attention, and then you check the account which should be debited as you're correcting the error. This is the first account that you should start with. And then the corresponding account should be credited. Do we have any question from anyone? Okay. If we are good, then we can proceed. We can proceed and let's just look at the second error, which is the error of commission. By definition, we say the error of commission is committed, when the correct amount is entered in the wrong person's account, okay? But this account belongs to the same class, or these accounts belong to the same class. Listen carefully. The error of commission is committed when you enter the transaction in the wrong account. Of course, that account should be those two accounts in question have to belong to the same class of accounts. So this is the type of the error that we are looking at. So let's have the example. A purchase of goods worth £44 from C. Simmons. Remember, you've purchased goods from Simmons C. It was entered in error in C. Simpson's account. How do you do the journal entries to correct this error? Okay. Remember, when you're correcting error, you just need the account that you're debiting and the other one that you're crediting. So you have purchased the goods from C. Simmons, and then in error, you end up entering it in someone else's account. Is there anyone who can suggest on the correct journal entries we can do for this error, to correct this error? Anybody? Hello? Which accounts are we debiting? We have two accounts in question here. Which account do you think is getting debit? Right. So we have two accounts in question here. We have the person, all these are personal accounts because they are accounts of people, the names of people. So you have purchased some goods from Simmons, and then you end up entering it in Simpsons. So it meant that if you entered the purchase of goods from Simpsons, it meant that you credited Simpsons' account. But you are not supposed to credit Simpsons' account. You are supposed to credit Simmons' account because he's a person whose goods you purchased. So what happens is that if you are to correct this error, okay, you are to debit this account because if you credited the Simpsons account, it meant that you are deducting the money from the wrong account. So now as you are correcting, the first thing is to give back the money that belongs to this account, which is C. Simpson's account, should be debited with the same amount. Then you credit C. Simmons account to be credited with the same amount. Why are you crediting the C. Simmons account? It's because we have purchased goods from here, so the assets have decreased from this person's account. There is a decrease in terms of the assets, so that's why we're crediting the account. And of course, we have to debit C. Simpson's account because he has to receive back what you had deducted from his account. Are we okay? Is there any question? Hello, you guys, do you have any questions on the two errors that we have discussed already? I'm showing you how to do the journal entries. To correct, to narrate, you can simply say the error of commission is now corrected. When you say this, the accountant who understands already knows that the way how you have just entered this transaction, it means that the debiting account is the account that really needed to be debited. And then the credited account is the account from which you deducted some money or some assets. Okay. So those are the journal entries that you'd make for that error. Let's look at the error of principal now. The error of principal, which is the third class of errors. We're looking at examples and the correct journal entries that you can do for the same. Remember, there is a debited account and an account to be credited. It is saying that, let's look at an example. It says that Here is a purchase of a machine that is worth £200, and it is debited to the purchaser's account instead of being debited to the machinery account. By the way, the error of principle, we say that this is an error that is committed when you enter the transaction in the wrong account, and of course, this wrong account belongs to a different class, or these two accounts, they belong to the different class of accounts. That's how different it is from the error of commission. The error of commission, you are entering into the account which is belonging to the same class. Remember, the accounts are divided in two different classes from what we said in the previous studies. We said we have got what we call the real accounts, okay? You have got those that you call the real accounts. From the real accounts, these are accounts of the assets. Then you have got the nominal accounts, okay? The nominal accounts. These are accounts that relate to the profits and losses of the business. And then you have the personal accounts. This is the third class and the last class. Personal accounts are those accounts which, you know, bear the names of the people, the accounts for the people, you know, they are personal accounts, or for the names of for the institutions, the accounts for some companies, for the institutions, or the organizations, those are personal accounts. So now, riding on the same lines that I'm just communicating, we have to analyze the transactions, which two different classes they belong to. And once we analyze that, then we debit the account that needs to be debited and credit the other one that needs to be credited. The question is, there is a purchase of a machinery that is worth £200 being debited to the purchaser's account instead of being debited the machinery account. So you have purchased the machinery, which is an asset, right? So the machinery account, these are assets, so it belongs to the real accounts. Okay, the machinery account belongs to the real accounts. It's a real account. Then when you look at the purchase account, the purchase account is not a real account. Okay, this one belongs to the nominal accounts. So because these accounts are belonging to different classes of the accounts, then you have to understand that that is the error of principle, because this is where you are dealing with the two accounts that belong to different classes of the accounts. So let's have a look at this question now and see which account should be debited as we are correcting the error now. Remember, you purchased some goods for the machinery. So when you purchased, in an actual sense, you needed to debit the machinery account, but you ended up debiting the purchaser's account. So as you are correcting the error, you debit the machinery account. So the machinery account should be debited. And of course, the purchaser's account should be what? The purchaser's account should be credited. You are correcting the error now. And enumerate that the error of principle has finally been corrected. The error of principle is now corrected. Yeah, so get it from here. When you purchase maybe an asset, let's say the assets, you buy an asset, it's not a purchase, okay? Purchasing simply means buying things specifically for resale, okay? You're buying goods or services for resale. That is the meaning of that. Buying goods for resale. Buying some goods for resale. Okay. So whenever you buy some goods for resale, please, that is what you, that's when you say it's a purchase. But when you buy a machine, you're not buying this machine for resale. So for that good, it's not a purchase. It's wrong to record the transaction in the purchases account. So these are the journal entries that you do. You debit the machinery account and credit the purchases account. Is that clear? Do we have any question from anyone? Feel free to ask questions. You turn on your mic and ask, and then we can always attend to you. Hello? Is there any question from anyone? Okay. The class is very quiet. Can I hear the confirmation? Are you able to hear me? Aisha, are you able to hear me? Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for the confirmation. Now we proceed with the other class of the other type of errors. Remember, we have already talked about 3 types of errors and how we do the journal entries for each of them. Talked about the error of omission, error of commission, and the error of principal. Now let's look at the compensating errors. Okay, the compensating errors. What about the compensating errors? You know, these are the errors by definition from what we said last time. These are basically the errors that cancel themselves. They cancel themselves out. Yeah. So these are the errors that do cancel themselves out. As a result, the trial balance does not fail to agree when these errors are there or they are committed. So for example now, you see, what happens is that with the error of the compensating error is when you, for example, you have your trial balance, right? It has got the credit side and the debit side. This is your trial balance. And then there is an error whereby the one account, okay, one account which belongs to the debit side of the trial balance, okay, one account which belongs to the debit side of the trial balance, maybe it's below by 200, let's say it's undercast by 200, or is overcast by 200, for example. To be overcast, it simply means it's more than, okay, than it is required to be by 200. To be undercast, it means it's less than 200 than it is actually supposed to be. So now, when you have these 2 accounts that belong to different sides of the trial balance, let's say one account that belongs to the debit side is higher by 200. Then you have another account, okay, another account, but that account belongs, let's say, to the credit side now, and it is also increased by 200 in error. You'll find that these errors will cancel themselves out. They do cancel. Why? Because when you balance off the account, you find that this will have no impact, because you find that the debit side increased by the same amount and the credit side increased by the same amount. So there is no difference. Okay, there is no difference. So you find that the trial balance will still balance. So the main message that you need to get from here is that these accounts belong to the different sides of the trial balance, and that is extremely important. It is important for you to understand that. So let me maybe just a little bit remind you some of the accounts that are debited on the trial balance and those that are credited. I say that on the trial balance, you debit all assets. All accounts of the assets are debited. Cash, bank, as long as it's an asset, you debit on the trial balance. And then on the trial balance, you debit the expenses. So the expenses accounts, all the expenses accounts are debited, right? So you have to pay attention to the question. Remember, these accounts can just belong to either of these. And all the losses, okay, all the losses are debited. You debit the losses, debit expenses, and you debit the assets. That's what you do, okay? But when it comes to crediting, what do you credit? You credit the capital account, that's equity, and liabilities. All the accounts for liabilities should be credited, and all the gains, the incomes, okay? As long as it's an account of incomes, it is credited on the trial balance, okay? The incomes, for example, you have income received, commission received, whatever received, as long as it's an income, rent received, you have to credit these. They go on the credit. So those are accounts that sit on the credit side. Now pay attention. At least I've grouped the accounts for you. There are those that sit on the credit and those that sit on the debit side. All assets account, as long as it's an asset, they're on the debit side. All expenses accounts, rent account, salaries account, or sundry expenses account, depreciations account, provisions for whatever account. As long as it's an expense anyways, you record it on the debit side. Having been reminded of these few things, now that you have been reminded of which account sits on the debit and the credit, get it now from here, that the compensating errors cancel themselves out. That is what happens. So now, let's read an example. You see what happens. The sales account is overcast by 200, as also is the wages account. So get it from here. A sales account which sits on the credit side of the trial balance. A sales account is the overcast, which means the sales account is like the credit side of the trial balance is higher by 200. And also the wages account. Wages account is what? It's an expense account, right? We say that wages are expenses. So wages accounts will be debited. It belongs to the debit side of the trial balance. Why do we say it belongs to the debit side of the trial balance? Because it's an expense. So you're saying that even this one is way higher by 200. So if you have observed clearly here, both sides of the trial balance have increased by 200. The credit side by 200 and the debit side also has done the increase. It has increased by 200. And so what do you need? You need to actually correct the account. Very well. How do you correct these accounts? Remember, this is too much Apple. Like it is like it's an overcast. There is too much money by 200 pounds. So what you do, you have to correct the error. You have to deduct. Follow nicely. Now, how can you reduce the amounts that are on the credit side? From the sales account, what entries can you do? Remember, it is up by 200. It needs to reduce. What can you do to the sales account so that it reduces in terms of the amount it has? Hello? What do you do with the sales account? Anyways, you will have to debit it. Because if you credit the sales account, remember the sales account belongs to the credit side of the trial balance, which simply means, again, it will increase. The credit side will increase, okay? So what you do, if you want to reduce the money on the credit side, do the opposite entry, okay? We need you to pay attention here. You do the opposite entry, which means you have to debit you have to debit the sales account by 200. So when you debit the sales account by 200, it means there will be 200 this side again, which will cancel with this other 200. That is how you are deducting. So whenever you want to cancel, you don't really cancel by by striking. What you do is you just do an opposite entry, and then you would have corrected the error in that way. Then how can we reduce now the wages account? Remember, the wages account is on the debit side, right? It's on the debit side because it's an expenses account. And it means that the debit side is up by 200, it's over by 200. You have to deduct. So for you to deduct the entries on the debit side, you do the opposite entry. So the wages account is debited. What you do to reduce the amount, you have to credit it. So you credit the wages account. When you credit the wages account, it means that the 200 on the wages will cancel with the 200 on the debit side. I don't know if you guys are following. Hello, are you able to hear me? Aris, are you following?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So now, this simply means that when you're correcting the errors, here is the debited account, here is an account to be credited. We have said that for you to correct the error, what do? You have to debit the sales account. So the sales account is debited in this case with what? With 200. And what is credited is the wages account. The wages account belongs to the debit side, but since you want to correct it, you credit it. That is how you can deduct the amount. And you have a 200 as well. So these are the correct journal entries. And then you write the compensating error is now corrected. Or in other words, you can say correction of overcast of 200, each in the sales account and the wages account, which compensated for each other, is now corrected. This is the correction. So basically, it's just that easy and very straightforward. Having communicated about the compensating error, let's look at the error of original entry. The error of what? Original entry. Remember, with the error of original entry, we say this is an error that occurs from the very beginning as you enter in the books. So here is a question. It says that there was a sale of 38 pounds to, Smiles that was entered in the books as 28. So it needs another 10 of sales entering now. So you sold 38, but in your books, you recorded it as what? As 28. So you have to correct. So how do you make the entries? Just know that the account is down by the difference. Okay, now look, there is 38 amount here. We have 38 less 28. So the difference is of 10 pounds. So we have the difference of 10. Now this 10 should go where? A sales account of 38. You sold the goods worth 38, but you wrote 28, which means that the sales account is under by 10. So you are selling to who? To Smiles, to Smiles. So you have to debit Smiles account by the difference. Okay? You debit the person's account, Smiles account by the difference of 10, and then obviously you will credit the sales account. The sales account should be credited now by 10. Why are you crediting the sales account? Because you are selling. I mean, the assets are moving. it's a deduction, and so you write only the difference, okay, between the two amounts. Okay. The compensating errors. Let's have the compensating errors. Now, a very, very crucial example that we have, a compensating error. This is a payment. For example, the error that, not a compensating error, sorry, an error of complete reversal of entries. This is where, let me say, you debit the wrong account or credit the wrong account. How does it happen? There is an account that you are supposed to debit. Instead of debiting that account, you credit it, right? You are supposed to debit, one account is supposed to receive the money. But instead of giving the money to that account, you end up what? Crediting, meaning deducting some amounts from that account. Or on the other hand, there is an account that needs to be credited, meaning you deduct some money from there. Instead of crediting it, then you debit it again. That is how the error of complete reversal occurs. So let's have an example. There is a payment of cash of £16 to M. Dixon that was entered on the receipt side of the cash book in error and credited to M. Dixon. You get, you are paying cash to Dixon. In short, this person was supposed to do what? To receive. Dixon was supposed to receive £16. You are supposed to make a payment to him. But instead of giving him the 16, you ended up crediting again, meaning there was an error. Instead of giving money to this person's account, you deducted again some money from their account. So how do you correct the error? You have to multiply the 16 by 2. Why multiplying by 2? First of all, we have to give Dixon, you have to give Dixon the money that belongs to him. The first is 16, is the amount that belongs to him. That one which you deducted from him, that's his amount. Then the other 16, okay? The other 16 is the now normal transaction. So first of all, that 16, you're giving back the money that you deducted from the wrong account. First is 16 you give back. Then the other 16, you are now giving the amount to the correct account. So you multiply the amount by 2. 32 is given to this account, M. Dixon's account. And then the cash account obviously has to be credited by 32. Okay. Why crediting it by 32? Because the 32 pounds will move out of the cash account. The first is 16 to compensate Dixon, then the other 16 to settle the transaction. And this is now the error of complete reversal of entries. The last error that we have in this example is a transposition error, which is basically an error that occurs when the figures have been transposed or have been moved. So a credit purchase, this is an example, a credit purchase from P. McLaren costing 56 was entered in books as 65. So there is a difference of 9. You purchased some goods worth costing 56, but you ended up recording as if recording 65. So what you do to do this, to correct this error, you debit McLaren account and then you credit the purchases account. Yeah, we debit the McLaren account by the difference of 9, of course, and then the purchases account is credited by the very difference. So the other class of errors that we'll learn now how to correct are those errors that affect the agreement of the trial balance. Okay, can end here.